The afternoon of the 26th, before the bomb went off, I got a call from Jack, and he's like, look, man, this is a marathon, not a sprint. You guys got to slow down, tighten things up. And then the bomb happened, and it was like, fuck. What's happening to women and children in Afghanistan is not getting near the international coverage that it should. Former Afghan police officer. She was AUP, which is like the Afghan version of SVU. She had locked multiple Haqqani and Taliban up for rapes. The biggest thing I have learned from this experience is that if you live a life in service of others, you will never feel empty. And for me, as an addict and alcoholic in recovery, that's huge, because I drank to fill the emptiness. Until we get those 150,000 out, we're not going to stop. This work is far from over. If it takes 10 years, if it takes 20 years, if it takes 30 years. That's the part I can't wrap my mind around. I said I don't have a conspiracy theory, and I truly don't. I just don't understand why. Why are we doing this to people that bled alongside us for 20 years? Ben Owen, BENOWEN, Moral Compass, and Diesel Jack may use this footage.
All right. What's your military history?
So I was in ROTC when the towers came down on 9/11. Dropped out of college and enlisted, and then by the end of the summer of 2002, I had broken my leg and was discharged. So not a whole lot of military history.
What was your path? What did you do until the evacuation from Afghanistan?
So I broke my leg at Fort Benning. I was in the infantry, and long story short, ended up addicted to opiates, and before long became a statistic, homeless, heroin addicted. I've been a serial entrepreneur for the last decade plus, and so started up businesses, and after I got my life back together, started up a data company called Black Rifle. We serve the firearms industry, and that's what got us tapped into Afghanistan.
How did that all come about, the Afghanistan situation for you? I know that one day nothing was going on, one day we figured out the State Department was messing everything up, and the next day a bunch of guys like you were getting involved. How did that come about? A phone call?
Yeah, so I think it was in July of last year, a Marine intelligence officer called me up, a buddy of mine, and I was picking my oldest kid up from work, and anyway, Jack just said, hey man, you want to do something crazy? And my answer to that's always going to be yes. So he goes, sweet, we're gonna get some dudes out of Afghanistan. And I was like, what the fuck? That's crazy for sure. I've never been to Afghanistan, but I was 100% game to see what we could do. So we started, using OSINT and device level data to try to map safe ground routes out. This was, I think the Taliban was in Badakhshan at that point, or maybe Coast Province. I don't remember. It's been chaos, but long before they made it to Kabul, 2-3 weeks before that. So we started using basically cell phone data to map safe ground routes out of the country, or between provinces, whatever the case may be. And then it slowly started moving more into, what can you tell me about this particular device? What devices are associated with it? So we started using a lot of publicly available breach data to kind of figure out whose device that was. I didn't really understand why we needed to know all this, but the end result was we were able to vet a lot of Afghans, locate some missing people, make contact with AMSIT family members based on associated devices and social media accounts. So pretty quickly, what started as a data endeavor became more of a personal one. We started making contact with a lot of Afghans, and then their AMSIT family members too. So by the time the Taliban had made it to Kabul, we were getting handed manifests from lieutenant generals. And in tandem, as I mentioned, I used to be a homeless and heroin addicted vet, so we had started a nonprofit to help homeless and addicted vets. The day Kabul fell, the IRS approved the nonprofit, and so by the time the NEO was over, we were like, dude, we've got a nonprofit that's already stood up to help vets. It doesn't have to be American vets. We have countryless vets in Afghanistan now. So, and that was the number one request we were getting from vets in crisis anyway. It was like, dude, help my TERP. Don't spend any money on me. Get my guys out. So we started standing up safe houses after NEO was over. I mean, the collapse of Kabul before we withdrew from HKI was, it was pure chaos. You've been exposed to it, So we were involved with that entire process. I had families at Abbey Gate. I was actually on a video call with one of my families when the bomb went off. So we shifted from, this everybody's hair's on fire, running around trying to get 10,000 things done at once and not sleeping to how do we make this a sustainable operation. Because we figured out pretty quickly this is not going to be over like we thought it was. You know, when I first got tapped into it, we thought, okay, the drawdown's August 31st. Let's go balls to the wall until then. And I remember the afternoon of the 26th, before the bomb went off, I got a call from Jack, and he's like, "Look, man, this is a marathon, not a sprint. You guys got to slow down, tighten things up." And then the bomb happened, and it was like, fuck, you know. But he was right. And still at this point, we're thinking, okay, maybe 30, 60 days. State Department's going to do the right thing. We're going to get all these guys out. And so we stood up a lot of safe houses just to hold people, because so many Afghans had moved from the boonies to Kabul because it was clear that was the only airport people were going to be evacuated from. And then, you know, their houses out in the boonies, they got no way to get back to them, or they've been taken over, or they're rentals and now they're not paying rent. So we had, I think at one point, 680 Afghans in our safe houses with nowhere to go. And trying to navigate the next steps on that, that was a heavy task.
So, just for those that don't know, I need you to explain what a neo is.
Oh, yep. Sorry about that.
No, we know, but you know,
right.
And I also need you to explain that the safe houses were in Kabul.
So they weren't all,
Well,
but yeah,
or wherever
yeah.
they were, because you know we don't have any way of knowing that. So
right.
I don't want you to give away any intel, but just explain how those. You know, you've already explained that you use cell phones to figure
Yep.
out, but like where those were, how far they were away
Okay.
from HKIA, and just give us a little more background to those that are just civilians out there
Okay.
hearing this and trying to understand this.
Sure. So, you know, the NEO, the non-combatant evacuation operation, was where the U.S. military was trying to get basically everybody that's not a combatant, so anybody that's not Taliban, withdrawn from Afghanistan. So we were trying to evacuate all of them from HKIA, which is Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul. So for all intents and purposes, the non-combatant evacuation operation stopped on August 26th, and the bomb went off at Abbey. We still had Afghans all over the place. We had them in, you know, Jalalabad, all over Nangarhar province, Kunduz, Khost, Kabul, Mazar. So when we started standing up the safe houses, we pretty much mirrored where these clusters of allies were. The majority of them were in Kabul because that's where the airport was in operation, but, you know, the very end of August, early September, and maybe into October, there was a sense that more was going to happen from Mazar Sharif. So we had probably 15 safe houses in Mazar Sharif, which is about a 10-hour drive from Kabul. And then state shut that pipeline down. So we had an air bridge going from Mazar Sharif to Abu Dhabi in UAE. And I think Nick was actually up there with Kevin Metcalf, who was a dear friend of the guy that tapped me into this whole thing to begin with. I definitely got tricked into this. You know, we had no idea that it was going to go as long as it has. But not in a million years would I change anything. The people that we've met through this process, the patriots that we've met here in America, and then the Afghan patriots, I mean, it's really shifted my entire perspective on humanity.
Why'd you get involved? What was I mean, here's somebody calls you.
Yep.
It doesn't really tell you what's going on. So we're going to try and do this. What made you get involved?
You know, I'm always up for a challenge. I'm always up for anything crazy and fun. And, you know, the whole reason I enlisted was I wanted to go to Afghanistan. So, having not been able to do that due to injury back in 2002, this looked like a great opportunity to kind of get to fulfill one of those dreams I've always had. Aside from that, you know, just from a purely human perspective, we have people that have bled for this nation, that fought alongside us, and they've just been abandoned. There's no other word for it. So I felt a deep moral obligation to get involved with this for just a myriad of reasons. And then, you know, it's, like I said, I wouldn't change it in a million years.
What was the biggest surprise to you about the entire operation?
The biggest surprise to me about the entire operation was how much our government is working against us. And I'll give you a story to highlight that. In August of last year, maybe it was early September, I bought tickets to Tajikistan, to Dushanbe. And we had a con op. We were going to get some helicopters and go to Mazar-i-Sharif and move people. And I did what I thought was the right thing. I coordinated this with the U.S. Embassy in Dushanbe. The chief consular there was fully aware of our plan, and he said, I cannot advise you in strong enough terms not to go to Afghanistan, but I know you're going to do what you're going to do. So, we had this excellent plan. We were going to go move people. We had a guide in Tajikistan that was going to help everything. A senator that I won't name got me a passport appointment. And anyway, the short version of events is like in the middle of this, before I ever even boarded the flight in New Orleans I think I was flying into maybe Doha, or it could have been Islamabad. We had a crazy plan, but they shut the whole thing down. State did. And, it's apparent this came from state in D.C. I want to make a very clear distinction between consular staff that works in U.S. embassies around the world and state in D.C. We have not run across a single member of consular staff anywhere, and I've been to a couple of places outside the U.S. working this evacuation, and worked with consular staff, and they've been very open to what we're trying to get done. They're looking for any way they possibly can help, but somewhere up the food chain, and I can only assume it's coming straight from D.C., this is not what they want to see happen. And that's been the most shocking thing to me, is how much our own government, and it's like some mysterious shadow figure in the government, right? Because like I said, every single person we've interacted with has wanted to help, and I do believe it's genuine. I don't think they're just trying to placate us. We've seen people risk their jobs that work in State Department. We've seen people in multiple three-letter agencies risk their careers to help us get things done. But somewhere up that food chain, things are getting shut down. We had a meeting with a member of parliament from Kosovo and their chief of mission at their embassy in D.C. The Kosovars were 100% on board with letting us move Afghans to Kosovo. We sent one of our guys from Flanders to Kosovo, who went to North Macedonia as well, met with a ton of government over there. We had land privately donated. We had staff in Kosovo. We had a great plan to build our own humanitarian city, very similar to what they had in Abu Dhabi. And state first co-opted 1,000 of our beds and then shut down the entire operation. And we can really only assume that they demarched us, essentially. They told the Kosovo government to stop communicating with us, because all these relationships we had, I mean, we were taking a member of parliament out to dinner, introducing her to former secretaries of defense here in the United States. Like, we had a great rapport with everyone we worked with in their government, and then all of a sudden it was over. All comms stopped. And of course, nothing ever got done for our Afghans.
Without going down a conspiracy theory rabbit hole, why would state do this? What do you think is the reason?
So, that's a great question. And like you said, we don't want to go down a conspiracy theory rabbit hole. And honestly, I don't have a conspiracy theory rabbit hole. I can't wrap my mind around it. It's one of those things where the absence of political will it's just making it impossible to get this done, which sucks, because the terms of failure are it's measured in the loss of human life and suffering at a scale that I've never been exposed to in my life. What's happening to women and children in Afghanistan is not getting near the international coverage that it should. And then here in America, we're on the heels of the Me Too movement, and obviously women, in America are better poised than anywhere else in the world, but we're just turning a blind eye to what's happening in Afghanistan. And now we've got genocide going on. Of course, the Hazara genocide over there has been happening, but we're seeing it with Tajiks now too. And nobody's doing anything at the federal level that we can tell. Nobody's making a measurable dent in this. In fact, it's almost the opposite. They are making it harder for us to make a dent in it. And you have this huge network of 10 and 11 time combat deployed vets, and then a lot of guys like myself who may have served but never deployed, and then you have a ton of civilians that are trying to get things done. We're coming out of pocket. We're spending our own money. We're losing time with our families that we're never going to get back, trying to make a dent. Like, the takeaway is that we're willing to shoulder this load. We're honored to shoulder the load, and we're effectively shouldering it, but we're being blocked at the finish line. And that's the part I can't wrap my mind around. I said I don't have a conspiracy theory, and I truly don't. I just don't understand why. Why are we doing this to people that bled alongside us for 20 years? So, if we're trying to look at this from a 30,000 foot view and decide where the problem is, it really feels like it's coming from State Department. And again, when I say State Department, I'm talking solely in D.C. at the highest levels, because everybody we've interacted with, and we have volunteers that work for state. Like, there are people within State Department trying to fix this problem, but their superiors, somebody way up high, is roadblocking every touchdown we throw. If you find a way to squeeze 4 people out in a legal and safe manner, I guarantee you state's going to get that pipeline shut down. And that, I don't know why that is happening.
What was the best moment for you during this whole thing?
You know, there's been a lot of best moments. The good ones keep getting better and the bad ones keep getting worse. In the beginning, the very first family that Lieutenant General sent me was an easy out, and that's really what baited me into going down this rabbit hole. That was a huge win. It was a family of 11. Their AMSIT brother, who we were able to locate through my day job company using just open source breach data, ended up being a linguist at Fort Bragg, and so he's an American citizen, and we saved 11 members of his family, to include his mom. You know, we've had a lot of wins like that. We've evacuated, and this is back during the NEO, evacuated pregnant women who gave birth to AMSIT children here in America. And then those were big wins. They were awesome. But as time has passed, I think what has really done more for me than those wins where we're actually seeing lives get saved has been the community I've seen stood up. The number of Americans, both veteran and civilian alike, people from different backgrounds that you would never ever expect to see together, much less working together, just come together to do something bigger than ourselves, to do something that is costing us. It's costing us time, it's costing us money, it's costing us heartache, you know. But to see all these people we don't benefit from this. There's nothing we stand to gain from it. It's just you see thousands of Americans that have stood up to do the right thing because it's what's right. And that to me has been the best thing about this entire process. It's restored my faith in humanity. My faith in the institution of American government has really never been lower, and that's sad. But my faith in humanity and in the goodness of my fellow American has never ever been higher, and it keeps getting stronger every day.
Awesome. What are the worst? What are the lows?
Man, we've had some lows. The first real big emotional low that we had, Abbey Gate was pretty fucking bad. But it didn't really hit me quite as hard as some of the others. We had early on our very first safe house. You know, we didn't know what the fuck we were doing. We rented an apartment. And then we reached out to multiple Afghan families trying to figure out who to put in it first. And I had an Afghan SF pair of brothers and their former Afghan SF dad. And then I had a widow and her orphaned children. And obviously I stuck the woman and kids in this apartment. And within half an hour of making that decision, the Taliban came into the SF family's home and executed the father. And the 2 brothers sent me a picture of their dad, not to be mean, but to let me know that they understand why I put the women and kids there, and that their deceased father would have supported my decision to do that, even though he's now dead. That sucked. That was a gut punch, because I mean, there's no way around it. I got this dude killed. Because we had him in position where he was. We told him to stay there, and the Taliban came in and executed him in front of his family. And we've had a few like that, and that's heavy, to know that a decision you made got somebody killed. But look, if we had not put the women and children there, who knows what would have happened? We've had women raped. We had the Taliban rape one woman and send us video of them doing it. A former Afghan police officer. She was AUP, which is like the Afghan version of SVU. She had locked multiple Haqqani and Taliban up for rapes. So they raped her, and they sent us that video. We had another commando up in Kunduz send us a voice note and let us know it was going to be the last note he sent, and to make sure his wife and kids were taken care of. And he was stabbed and then run over by a car right after he sent the voice note. And we were sent pictures of that happening. So there's been just countless lows like that. The ones that fucked me up the most, though, seeing things happen to kids. There's nothing that hurts me worse than seeing kids suffer, and I have never in my life seen the level of I don't understand why somebody would do these things to children. And that, I mean, I've got 8 kids. One's adopted. Sometimes we foster 2 more, and that shit fucks me up, dude. That's not something I ever thought that I would see again after leaving the streets.
Why do you think, after the U.S. News is the bastion of rights and freedom and doing the right thing, and why do you think this is just being ignored? Because we know that atrocities that we can't even explain or see are going on. What do you think why?
So I think there's a couple of factors that play into why the American media is not covering this at the level that they would if these were white European kids. And race doesn't play into this. Or maybe it does. But it's not politically expedient for them to cover it. There's no political will to do anything about this. The powers that be in D.C. do not want to accept accountability. They don't want to acknowledge that any of this is happening. And at the end of the day, that does play into what mainstream media is willing to cover. The other side of it, and this is why I brought up the white European angle. The other side of that is at this point in our history, American media it's driven by ad revenue, online ad revenue, and Americans engage with content that they can relate to. And when we see, and I'm going to give you an example that will really highlight this and I think bring it home. When we see people that don't look like us and they live on the other side of the world and we can't relate to them suffering, it's not the same. And this was really made apparent to me when the Ukraine invasion popped off and we got pulled in again to an orphan situation. That was really what pulled us into Afghanistan to begin with. Anyway. And we got pulled into an orphan situation in Ukraine. And when I got the first pictures sent across, passports of these orphans that we needed to move, I started sobbing because they could be my children. They looked like my kids. And this is me, the guy that's been, spent a year of my life trying to evacuate Afghans who don't look like me. And it messed me up in the head. Like, why am I this upset seeing these kids just because, and it's not that they're white, but it's that they look like me. And so I think that's one of the big reasons that American media is not covering this to the extent we would expect them to, because Americans don't relate to it. We're not going to watch those videos. We're not going to, there's not ad revenue associated with it if nobody's looking at it. And it's frustrating to me that a lot of the outlets that are covering this are not considered mainstream. They're fringe outlets, which is weird because you've got historically very right-leaning outlets that are covering what's happening in Afghanistan. You've got very right-leaning, for the most part, straight white male vets that are the ones carrying the load here. Like, we've become bastions of women's rights and Muslim rights. I evacuated the self-described gayest man in Afghanistan, right? And we had to move him to 3 countries because the first one we got him to was even worse for homosexuals than Afghanistan was. And to this day, me and this dude talk weekly. He's cool as shit. But like, how did we end up here, where you've got the right wing, white vet population evacuating the LGBT community from a Muslim country? How is this even? I really wonder sometimes, did the CERN LHC kick us into a parallel universe or something?
Well, I think it's because we're not as far apart as the media wants everyone to think.
No, we're not.
When it comes right down to the core of us, we don't care who you marry. We just want to be able to marry who we want to marry, and so it really doesn't matter to us.
That's exactly right. And I think that is the takeaway, is that if you look at everything from a value standpoint, at the end of the day, our values are the same. We want people to be happy, to be able to raise their families, to be able to do what they want to do without interference from third parties or governments. And if we always lead from a place of values rather than belief systems, because you and I probably believe there's different ways to get to that end value. But if we start with the value, we lead with that value of goodness and love, we can work together all day long. And that's one of the coolest things about the evac is that we've got people from every political, racial, religious, every background you can imagine working together, and we don't give a shit what the other one believes because we know our values are aligned. And if our values are aligned, we're working towards the same goal, we can find a way to make this happen.
What is the biggest, if you were to sit down with your kids, what is the biggest thing that you have learned from this experience? What would you want them to know and carry with them?
The biggest thing I have learned from this experience is that if you live a life in service of others, you will never feel empty. And for me, as an addict and alcoholic in recovery, that's huge because I drank to fill the emptiness. If you live a life in service of somebody that cannot do for you in return what you're doing for them, you'll never feel empty again. And it really goes into, hell, even the soft values, right? De oppresso libera. We're defending the defenseless. And when you live your life from a place of love and service, you'll live a life worth having lived. And that's what I want my children to understand. If they go into adulthood and they're able to live for something bigger than themselves, whatever it may be, I've done my job as a father.
What's your biggest challenge now to accomplish anything?
So that's actually two different answers. My biggest challenge right now is figuring out how the hell to manage making a living, raising a family, and doing this work that I am not emotionally, physically, or spiritually capable of pulling myself away from. That is my biggest challenge right now. In terms of the evac, the biggest roadblock we're facing is we don't have the power to issue visas, and we're not going to break laws. So we can't move people. Without a visa, we cannot legally move somebody across a border. And that's very unfortunate because we have people that we know are going to die if we don't get them out of Afghanistan. And that's just the harsh reality.
It is a harsh reality because, we're responsible for this.
We are responsible for it. And, obviously we couldn't stay in Afghanistan forever. We all understand that. Nobody disputes that we had to draw down and pull out. But we have created an entire generation of Afghans that were completely dependent upon an American presence. We've got an entire generation of Afghan girls that grew up being told, you don't have to do things that way. You can be a cop, you can be a soldier, you can be a doctor, you can be a scientist. And we've just yanked the rug out from under them. And that's unconscionable to me. We have let every value we instilled in them for the last 20 years be ripped off. Everything we told them was a lie. And we've left them to the wolves, basically.
Is there anything I haven't asked you or talked about that you want to share?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head, man. Good questions.
Just give me a little summation about, hey, there's two organizations out there. Name your organization.
Yeah.
We're working every day, but we, the money's coming out of our pockets. We're if you want to help the situation, reach out to our organization, contact our organization. Just give me that if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. There's still countless organizations that are trying to get this work done, and we're not going to stop. We're out of money. We stay out of money. Flanders Fields is my organization. We raise as much as we possibly can. We're a member of the Moral Compass Federation. Our website's moralcompassfederation.org. If you'd like to support these efforts financially, that's a great place to do it. But we're not going to stop. And we're just a drop in a bucket that is full of orgs doing the same things we're doing.
Great. And let's just talk about how there's still 125 to 150,000 citizens, American citizens, and SIV holders, and let's just we'll end with that.
Yep.
Okay.
The work is far, far from over. We've still got somewhere in the neighborhood of 150,000 allies left downrange that are eligible for relocation to the United States. And when I say eligible, That means they were promised, if you do this, you get to come to America. And we have to honor that promise. You cannot do what the United States military does around the world without partner nation forces. And until we get those 150,000 out, we're not going to stop. This work is far from over. If it takes 10 years, if it takes 20 years, if it takes 30 years. Scott Mann has some friends in the 82nd Airborne who are 85 years old that are still doing this work for their Montagnard partners in Vietnam. If that's what it takes, that's what we're going to do. If it's 50 years from now.
Explain what an SIV visa is. Explain how the whole process comes about. You serve. You're promised this.
Yep.
Because civilians hear SIV visas, they don't have any idea.
They don't have a clue what it means, yeah, and neither did I to begin with. So, essentially, what an SIV is, it stands for Special Immigrant Visa, and that's just one of many pathways that an Afghan can immigrate to America or from any nation. In exchange for service to our country. So if you take a job as a combat interpreter and you're paid by the United States government, or if you're a CIA contractor, or you're building roads, or you're a linguist, or you're teaching on a post, any number of professions in Afghanistan, the U.S. government or military would approach Afghans and say, if you take this job and you work it for a year, you're eligible to receive a visa to come to the United States. So in other words, in exchange for your service, I'm going to grant you the privilege of living in America. And we were able to get tons of Afghans to assist us over the last 20 years with that promise, because it's a golden ticket, right? In theory. That is not how it played out. But that's the deal we made. And as a nation, what nation do you have if you can't keep promises? Who's ever going to trust us again? And then there's other pathways like P1 and P2. So this is, for the Afghan National Army, or for people that weren't directly paid by the U.S. government, but very much assisted in our mission there. They're eligible for yet another kind of visa, which feels at this point like a black hole. That pretty much is an empty promise today.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.